For the first years, the friars of Francis had no real written rule. They had a handful of sentences from the Gospel, the ones Francis had asked his earliest companions to read aloud, and a short form of life that Pope Innocent III had approved only by word of mouth around the year 1209. That was enough while they were few and knew one another by name. But the order had grown to thousands in a very short time, scattered from Spain to Germany, and a handful of sentences could no longer hold together men who had never set eyes on each other. They needed firm words, written down, the same for everyone. Out of that need, within a few years, two different texts were born, and in the distance between the one and the other you can read the whole drama of Francis. The first text is the one scholars call the Rule without a seal, because no pope ever set his seal upon it. It took shape around 1221. It is a long document, disordered, passionate, made of 23 chapters that overlap and repeat themselves. More than a code of laws, it is a sermon set down on the page. It overflows with quotations from the Gospel, one after another, as if Francis wanted every line of the friar's life to rest on a verse. It asks them to own nothing, to work with their own hands, to serve the lepers, to go through the world as pilgrims with neither purse nor staff. It is the heart of Francis poured onto the parchment, with all its sweetness and all its hardness together. But for that very reason it was useless as a law. Too long to learn by heart, too vague exactly where a clear norm was needed, impossible to send to a distant friary and say, "Here, this is your rule." Here the hand of the Church enters the scene. The cardinal protector of the order, Ugolino of Ostia, who one day would become pope under the name of Gregory IX, worked to turn that torrent into a channel. He wanted a text that was short, legal, capable of being approved, able to hold up an order that had become immense. And so, after a couple of years of reworking, the second text was born, the Rule with a seal. Pope Honorius III approved it officially with a solemn bull on the 29th of November in the year 1223, and that bull carried a name worth hearing, Solet Anera, which means the Church is accustomed to grant its favor. From that day the friars had at last a law that no one could dispute. But to look at the two texts side by side is to understand what had happened. The approved rule is short, lean, divided into 12 chapters. The gospel quotations before a flood are cut to the bone. The burning tone is cooled into careful formulas. Many of the things Francis loved most, said with fire in the first text, are softened or removed. It is a text an institution can govern. It is also a text that has lost part of the flame of the man who dreamed it. The word of one man had become the law of an order, and in the passage something had inevitably gone out. The most scalding point was poverty. Francis did not mean it as one virtue among others, but as the foundation of everything, to own nothing, neither the single friar nor the group, to live by work and by alms, with no houses of their own, no money, no reserves for tomorrow. But could an order of thousands of men with friaries, schools, sick to be cared for, truly stand without owning anything? The learned friars, the ones who studied and preached in the cities, pressed for a little more security. Francis resisted with all his strength. The approved rule keeps the ban on money and the duty of poverty, but in a way more open to compromise, and in just that crack there would open, after his death, the long and painful quarrel between those who wanted absolute poverty and those who wanted it softened. A wound that would divide the Franciscans for more than a century. There is one detail that says everything. Francis had agreed to submit his own life and that of the friars to the judgment of the Church of Rome, and he never drew back from that obedience, not even when it cost him. He had asked the Pope that the friars always be given a cardinal as protector, so that they would stay bound to the Church and never become a sect. But the very obedience he had wanted was also the instrument by which others cut his dream down to size. He had handed his creature over to an institution greater than himself, and the institution took it seriously, organized it, made it last, and in doing so it changed it. This is the meaning of those two documents. The rule without a seal is Francis speaking. The rule with a seal is the Church answering him. And between the two lies the price that every ideal pays when it wants to endure in time. It must become structure, and to become structure always means to lose a little of oneself. Francis accepted that price, but he carried it within him like a thorn, and in his last years he would entrust to another writing, freer and more his own, what the official rule could no longer say. In the next chapter, we will follow him into the night of Grexio, when he wanted to rebuild with real animals and a manger the birth of Jesus, to let simple people touch with their hands what words alone were not enough to say.